get ready to fight from within. You're about to go behind enemy lines.
Roger, 3-2. Goliath copies all. Go ahead. Target is surrounded by multiple firms entering what appears to be a residential area. Requesting permission to engage. Over.
From the People's Republic of New York City, you're now going behind enemy lines with Gene Baradelli and Russ Gallo. And you are now behind enemy lines. Hey there, how you doing, America? Gene Baradelli here with you. So glad you could be with us for a very special show. And we're glad you're joining us, whether you're joining us at www.behindenemylinesradio.us or if you're checking us out on one of our broadcasts, whether it be AM radio, FM radio, the internet radio, or if we're traveling along with you as a podcast. We're certainly glad to be along for the ride with you for a very special show, like I said at the outset. We have Julie Poner coming on the show. Her story is a harrowing one, folks. I'm going to tell you right now. It's a learning experience for me talking to her. One of the longest interviews we did, and intentionally so. The topic that we're going to be discussing with Julie is immigration marriage fraud. Now, I'm not talking about the sexy issues like mail-order brides or, marriages of convenience and, business dealings and things like that. When you hear Julie's story, it'll make you think of so many aspects of our own lives here in America where we bend over backwards for people who are not citizens. And this is another instance of that. Julie's story in a nutshell, and you're going to hear it later in great detail, is all about her marriage to a non-citizen. She then applies for the non-citizen to become a citizen in America through the marriage visa process. And essentially it turns into close to a decade of litigation because her husband, who happens to be a professional hockey player, her ex-husband now I should say, ends up claiming protection as a battered spouse. And according to Julie, this is a trend that is growing among immigrant populations because people are able to stay in the country longer under these protections. And folks, it sounds far-fetched and it sounds like a Hollywood drama. But I'm telling you, it's not. It's something very interesting about our domestic abuse laws that is being exploited by certain savvy immigrants that want to come here under false pretenses and remain illegally under the guise of protection under our laws. We're going to get wonky with it. We're going to get into the topic in a great deal of detail. And we're going to tell you what you can do to support Julie in her cause to change the law federally in order to prevent loopholes like this from occurring to other people who happen to fall in love with someone from overseas. But before we do that, we got to get to the breaking news this week. And we're going to touch on this very briefly because it just shows you here behind enemy lines, we may be a little bit ahead of the curve every now and then. Of course, the big news this week coming from Speaker Paul Ryan that he's not going to seek re-election after 20 some odd years of being in Congress. The Speaker is leaving the Congress. This is big news, and it could be analyzed any number of ways. It could be a personal decision between him and his family. It could be a vote of no confidence in the Trump agenda and the outcome of the midterm elections. It could be a number of different things, but I choose to focus on something from last week, folks. And what we're going to do is play again the interview, or at least part of it, that we did with our new friend Nick Polce, former Army Green Beret, now businessman who had decided before Paul Ryan decided not to run, he had decided that he was going to challenge Paul Ryan for the Republican nomination in the 1st District of Wisconsin. So you want to talk about prophetic, having Nick on the show last week, and then the news that Paul Ryan is leaving this week, maybe that interview had a little bit to do with it. I can't even say that with a straight face. I just can't say that with a straight face because we all know it's not true. That's fake news right there. But getting the word out about Nick and who he is and what he stands for is important for me because now more than ever, voters in that area need an informed choice. And I think learning about Nick and this new wave of Trump-inspired candidates who are willing to challenge the old status quo could be the saving grace for Republicans in the midterm election. If Republicans go out for candidates that they're passionate about, like they did for President Trump, maybe you save a few seats, and by saving those few seats, you save the majority. But let's get reacquainted with Nick. If you want to listen to the entire interview that we did last week, where I fumble around with dates and times and things like that, you can check it out on any one of our podcast outlets. It's always available for download. We keep all our shows archived, whether it be iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, Podbay, Player FM, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, Auto Radio, any number of outlets. Of course, iHeartRadio. You can always check it out there. You can check out the full interview that we played last week on air. But now, let me give you a taste of what Nick Polce stands for and his positions on the issues. And it all starts with a very simple concept of reform that he wants to institute first and foremost, and that's term limits.
If there was going to be one single thing that we could do, it would be term limits. And one of the things that we're pushing is 6 years. 6 years in the House and 6 years in the Senate. And I know that is not something that one person can do on its own, on their own, like me going there. So I feel like I'm part of a larger freedom movement where there's a lot of different men and women in different districts across the country that are running with a similar vision to get to Washington and to start to put things in place like a term limit where that it forces you to work for a few years and then leave. And I think that will go a long way. But it's not simply term limits. That's just one thing if we could get it involved. The other thing has to do with spending. Quite frankly, spending is that you spend too much time there, you forget that it's not your money. And then you start acting like it's your money. And so that's the second part of this is cutting that spending and remembering whose money it is that you're actually supposed to be using correctly.
Absolutely. You touched on spending money. And I can't think of, when I think about Paul Ryan in the past year, I can't think of a bigger failure of, where money continually gets spent and we're seeing less and less return than when it comes to the cost of medical care, Medicare, the failure to repeal Obamacare, and replace it with a viable replacement. Do you have any opinion on the job Paul Ryan did, or in my opinion, it's his lack of leadership to be able to get that done last year, despite having a Republican president and a Republican Senate and a Republican House to get it done? What's your opinion on Speaker Ryan's job when it came to the healthcare debate?
Yeah, that's a great point. That's one of the frustrations that we felt like we couldn't accomplish because we held all the different levels of power there, and the healthcare, removing that very poor Affordable Care Act, falls at the leadership, both at the Congress, like you said, with the Speaker, and then at the Senate. Because the thing is, everything that comes out, anything that gets to the floor of the House or the Senate comes out of leadership's office. And so if they're not getting things done, it falls at their feet. Particularly with that omnibus bill. I mean, you had a $1.3 trillion spending bill under a Republican-controlled House. Remember, then in 2015, we had that $1.1 trillion spending bill under a Republican-controlled House. And that both is under Speaker Ryan's leadership.
And I should say to everybody, we're talking to Nick Polce right now, who's running as a primary challenger to Paul Ryan in the 1st District of Wisconsin. Check out nickpolceforcongress.com. And all these positions that we're talking about right now, you can find on his webpage in black and white. We're talking with someone with a lot of integrity here, folks. Special Forces, U.S. Army, businessman, real estate investor. He knows from whence he speaks when he talks about a lot of different topics here. I'm actually very impressed with your website, Nick, that you have everything here in black and white. It's definitely a departure from the murky doublespeak of Washington politics.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that frustrated me listening in over the past 10, 15 years, as much as we've been paying attention at the national level and local level to different races, is that you can never get a straight answer. And we just want to say, look, this is the things. Here's our principles. Here's what we believe in. Here's why we run it. And then we want to have a discussion on that. And if we do consistent Periscopes and consistent Facebook Live videos where we have question and answer, where we speak about policy, because we want to let people know where we stand so they know what they're getting prior to us going to office.
And that's really beneficial to have. Let's talk a little current events, Nick, because obviously what's dominated the news the past couple of weeks has been I don't want to call it a discussion of the Second Amendment, but I want to say the Second Amendment has been under siege. And, the news tool of the left has been those victims of the Parkland shooting who I'm sure are well-meaning, but are not really knowing from whence they speak, and they don't really have the grown-up experience to discuss the topic. Now, you're someone that has used firearms as a tool in the Army, and I'm sure have a deep respect for them. What is your opinion about what's going on right now in this current events climate when it comes to the Second Amendment under attack?
Yeah, I my heart, and look, I'm a dad, and if I sent my son, he's 16 months, and I can't imagine what it would be like to send my son to school and him not to come home because he was involved with some monsters activity. So it just breaks my heart. And with that understanding, though, is the Second Amendment is very clear. And the founders recognized that weapons in the hands of a few lead to oppression of the many. And that's why they created that Second Amendment, with that historical understanding. So we really need to focus on violence. And what is it, and why is it that there's violence in that specific time, and how do we stop that? And so you're right, the people that are the kids that are out there running around and doing these protests and attempting to raise awareness, I believe I'll have the best intentions, and they want to stop that violence as well. What's missing in those discussions, though, is when you don't have weapons and you have somebody walking into a situation that has a weapon, there's no way to defend yourself, and there's no way, and you have to fix that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that there's also been a failing of education on, basic civics. I'm about to turn 40 this year, and, high school's looking further in the rearview mirror than it used to be. But I remember having an American history professor and a teacher, and, I was able to understand civics at a younger age. I don't see that in the education systems anymore. And I think that's contributed to, a lot of these kids misunderstanding what socialism is and why we have a Second Amendment and all these things. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. We're losing our study of history. One of the things that Americans, we kind of have a stereotype where we think history starts the day we were born. And if we don't understand previous history and where we came from and how we got here and the lessons from history, then we're not able to go forward and put correct solutions in place. You're absolutely right on that education front.
Well, listen, it feels like we have really run the gamut here so far in this interview, but the real thing we have to get to is information about your race. Well, one thing we say on the show whenever we talk to somebody, and, we're one of the few shows out there that's actually friendly to people who want to challenge in primaries. We believe, Russell and I on the show, we believe primaries are a good thing. They strengthen the party as a whole. Iron sharpens iron. And, we're glad to see that there's somebody out there that's going to hold Speaker Ryan's feet to the fire. But we also know that money and people are what make the campaigns go around, and we want to make sure that you get as much of both as possible. So if people are listening in the area and they want to volunteer, or if they want to contribute, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways. First is our website, which is nickpolceforcongress.com. That's P as in Peter, OLCE, nickpolceforcongress.com. Now our Facebook page, Nick Polce for Congress, and then on Twitter as well, it's Nick4House, WI01. And so you can contact the campaign on any of those channels. Volunteer. If you want to donate, please. We need all the help we can get. We're only going to win with support here in the district and across the nation that believe in our vision.
And how far away is the primary up in Wisconsin?
So we are, August 14th is the primary, so we've got about 5 months left. So we kicked off the campaign in November 17th, and we're about the halfway point right now. And
I got to understand the response so far has got to be encouraging. I got to think Speaker Ryan can't exactly be the most popular person right now, even in his home district.
Yes, we've really started to build momentum, especially since this omnibus bill passed. It's bad for the country. It's been beneficial for our campaign. We're getting a lot of interest. We're getting a lot of donations coming in.